This week we're talking about Data Fabric Demystified with Pradeep Kuddy from IBM. If we can go to the next slide, please. So my name's Jeff Spear. I'm the Information Management Practice Lead at Ironside. Pradeep is from IBM, and he'll be taking us through sort of IBM's perspective on Data Fabric. At Ironside, we really, we have a point of view on organizing your data and analytics, in today's environment called the Modern Analytics Framework. And the Data Fabric is really a great perspective and view on a way to do that, to handle sort of the fact that there's just so many different data sources and they're all over the place, and getting them together is increasingly difficult. And so really looking forward to hearing what Pradeep has to say about this, and hopefully you are as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Pradeep. Oh, Pradeep, you're on mute. Oh, it's always a challenge doing it in the morning.
Okay.
There we go. All right, take it away.
So thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. So as Jeff mentioned, we wanted to kind of talk about Data Fabric. So I'll start off the session as technology agnostic, nothing IBM centric. We'll talk about why is it imperative for organizations to think about a Data Fabric design. So in this presentation, we will cover the need as to why organizations must have a strategy around data. And we will also discuss the challenges that are inhibiting most organizations from extracting insights from their data. What are some of the factors contributing to these challenges? And what is a Data Fabric architectural solution to mitigate some of these challenges? And then we'll bring it to what's IBM's point of view, and what does IBM believe to be the critical elements and building blocks of an enterprise data fabric. And we have our 4 entry points or use cases that we would like to seed your thoughts around how could you start with the data fabric journey. And then we'll bring it with some next steps and some options for you to consider as well. So let me go to the next slide. So I want to start off with the why. So when you look, starting from left to right, all of these data points are very self-explanatory, right? The stats on the right, they point to the severity of the problem, considering the amount of data that is not utilized. And when you come to the left, it is actually the implications for organizations. So it is an opportunity to readdress the significance of a strategy coupled with an appropriate solution, that is Data Fabric over here. I'll also point out that the implications of using or utilizing incomplete data makes an organization less competitive, right? In more severe cases, using incorrect or incomplete information could actually result in legal actions, security as challenges, or other severe situations, right? So a good example would be if an enterprise were to create a system that automatically approves or rejects a loan application, but due to the biased data that was used to train the model, it introduces an element of discrimination. Most organizations, they don't leave 2/3 of their data untapped just because they don't want to. It's because they're dealing with a staggering amount of data that is growing at a rate and speed at which they cannot handle it. And the bad news over here is that this problem is just going to be compounding itself day over day. So this means that unless these organizations are looking at some kind of an automated solution in terms of understanding their data utilization, this percentage of used data is going to decrease further, right? And so the enterprises are not going to be smart in terms of the business decisions, the business outcomes that they want to drive in order to improve their bottom line. Let me go to the next slide. So now that I've outlined the barriers to leveraging the data and the associated results, so let's get some context into how this has come about, right? So the hybrid and multi-cloud environment means that organizations are dealing with disparate data stores, and the distributed nature, it spans environments, it spans locations. And the implications of having a distributed topology is the associated increase in governance risk, right? The added cost for any kind of data movements, data migration, the challenges of processing data across a distributed landscape. And it is important to address the centralization of data. Like some might say that, oh, let's bring all the data into one place. While this solves the scale issue of the point-to-point approach, it creates other costs and complexities. The cost to copy, the cost to store, the cost of data synchronization. And every time, whether the company adds a new data source, either organically or through acquisitions, etc., what you've seen is it has a tendency to get messy as this volume of data increases. The other challenge that the central data collection does not solve are the regional data protection, right? If you are operating in multiple countries, you may be running into laws that prohibit data collection in a place outside of that specific region. So let's go into the what of the solution. Now that we have established that organizations, they need to be data-driven, there are challenges inhibiting the utilization of that data. So let's examine a solution that enables organizations to better utilize all of their data. The growing data landscape, combined with the distribution of data across your hybrid and multi-cloud environment, it demands a new approach to the way we manage and access the data. Ultimately, the goal over here is to connect the right data at the right time to the right people. And depending, irrespective of what your consumers might be, whether it is a business visualization person, whether it is a citizen data scientist, or whether it's a regular data scientist, you want to make sure that they have access to the right governed data in order to work on their outcomes, and in order to make sure that those outcomes are derived from the right data source. So what we are talking about over here does not mean that we are recommending a pendulum swing from centralization of data to decentralization. There is a balance between what needs to be logically or physically decentralized and what needs to be centralized. And that solution which enterprises should adopt is the data fabric. Data fabric, it's not a product, it's not a technology. It is an emerging data management concept about which is all about utilization of technology to accelerate your data delivery and your access to data. Now, when we talk about a data fabric, there are certain key characteristics that every data fabric must exhibit, right? So I'll go through some of those in terms of what are some of those characteristics that every data fabric must have. Number one, a data fabric, it aims at spanning a virtual or a logical net across multiple data sources, right? And the way we do that, the virtual net, is established through an intelligent knowledge catalog. The knowledge about how the data is linked and other vital information, which is used to make intelligent, automatic decision on how best to deliver that data. Now, this could be virtual, it could be physical, it could be a combination of different integration styles depending upon your use, your type, and the volume of data. Number two, it's all about the information in the catalog that drives the automatic decision making. And over here in the data fabric space, we refer to this as metadata activation, right? This is a very critical element of the data fabric. Now, this active role in a data management construct, it differentiates a data fabric catalog from your previous metadata catalog, which was mostly around the dictionary aspect to get a common understanding of your terms, etc., across the enterprise. Another critical part in accessing data within a hybrid distributed topology is data privacy, right? PII information, your governance, your regulatory compliance, whether it is CCPA or whether it is the Colorado Protection Act. How do you bring about the right set of data protection and data privacy rules? And then the knowledge catalog. That's pretty much the brain, the core of our data fabric. It basically, it helps us understand how peripherals are engaged, how are they orchestrated. And this catalog, it could be distributed as data may be managed by several sovereign entities or lines of businesses. And over there, you kind of get into the other term in the industry, which is more around the data mesh, which is more at the domain level, at the line of business level. And lastly, besides the automation, the catalog itself must be highly automated. Think about the scale at which your data is growing on a daily basis. You cannot get to all of those in a manual fashion. So how do you get the right level of automation, leveraging ML, in order to automate that entire process with minimal human interaction and with a higher accuracy from a data processing perspective? So these are some of the key tenets that we believe every data fabric should have at the enterprise level. So let's come down to what's IBM's point of view from a data fabric design perspective. So we believe that every data fabric must have the following elements. Oh, I'm sorry, we believe that every data fabric must have these 5 building blocks. So number 1 is all around self-service. How do you create a shop for data experience, a data as a service paradigm for your consumers? And they should be able to query data across the enterprise, irrespective of where that data sits, and should be served to them in an easy to consume format. No more of the hierarchical requests, right? I put in a request to IT and then they go and they start processing the data. We should have an environment which is completely self-service, a shop for data experience. The second is the augmented knowledge layer. The augmented knowledge layer, it's an abstraction layer that provides common business understanding of your data and insights that are derived from your digital exhaust. And we apply automation to act on those insights. Now, what are some of these insights? Some examples might include lineage events, auto-detecting your schema changes and applying your downstream changes and alerts, auto-tuning a data pipeline based on your SLA requirements. The third key element of a data fabric is smart integration. And this is all about, depending upon where your data is, what kind of an integration aspect do you want to introduce into the data? Sometimes you may want to copy it. Sometimes you may want to replicate it. So what are the different strategies, your ETL, ELT aspects that comes into play? The next one is your data governance, security, and compliance. Over here, it's all about having a unified definition and enforcement of your data policies tied to all of the other layers, right? So you're talking about governance, data quality, data stewardship. So everything like having a good governance strategy from a ground up. And we bring all of this together through the 5th key element of a data fabric, which is a unified life cycle. So think CI/CD in terms of how do you compose, build, test, deploy, manage the various aspects of data fabric in the life cycle of that particular data. So our point of view from an IBM perspective is every organization should have a data fabric strategy that is built on these 5 building blocks. So let me also take a little bit further, a step further in terms of how has IBM designed this particular data fabric construct. So this is a functional architecture. So on the left, you have all of your data sources. On the right, you have all the consumers of your data. Right over here, you see you have a combination of data scientists, data stewards, your business users, your data engineers. And in the middle, that's the heart of your data fabric, right? We have our knowledge catalog. It's a single source of truth that sits across the enterprise. And IBM has got multiple services that are available in order to help with the service from a data fabric construct perspective. So we talk about your curation services. Now, if you see the small yellow head, those are all the automated and automated capabilities that you get as part of our Cloud Pak for Data and our governance solution, right? Everything from discovery to classification to auto detection of sensitive data, data quality, assignment of business terms and policies. We have all of those, which is automated, which allows you to address your scale out of your data. On the self-service side of the house, you also have how do you search and find relevant data and the collaboration that occurs at the platform level from different personas' perspective. How do you tag the data? How do you basically request for multiple data sets in order to be joined and served to you in a self-service data preparation aspect? How do you collaborate in a project across multiple personas across your enterprise? And then you have your data privacy, your governance and protection capabilities, which is things like lineage, policy management, your data privacy and protection, depending upon what you want to do with the data. What kind of a privacy regulation do I need to impose? Do I need to mask the data? Do I need to redact the data? Do I need to obfuscate the data? So we basically have designed our data fabric strategy, which is completely centered from a governance standpoint, and that is the core of our solution as well. And our platform, which is Cloud Pak for Data, is essentially a platform for governed analytics. It's a true hybrid cloud solution as well. So the high-level approaches from a data fabric perspective, right? So by employing a data fabric, organizations are able to extract their technological complexities. So they don't have to worry about the point solution. There's a good seamless integration between all of their existing technology investments. And the results is the benefits outlined. You get smarter integration. You get a much better unified governance aspects, which leads to your knowledge insights as well. So the benefits of a data fabric. So let's look into it from two lenses. The first lens is for our CTO or from a technical team. So from a technical perspective, the data fabric, it offers simplification and cost reduction as compared to your traditional data architecture strategy, right? The fabric itself is based on a virtualized environment, which means despite the scale, there's only one environment to manage or operate. With its built-in automation and aim to decrease the data movement, there is also a significant simplification of your data delivery process. So these are some of the core competence benefits for the CTO organization. Now let's look into it from a business perspective in terms of what are the business aspects of investing into a data fabric. Number one, it's giving you faster and accurate insights. You're spending more time on the data analysis and less time on finding data. You're also able to get outcomes that is free of bias because your data is now governed. There is a single source of truth. You're accessing data which is clean, and you can establish your trust in your data layer. And the last one is the accelerated time to value that you get as a benefit of all of these automation and the fact that you're spending more time on the outcomes as opposed to the data delivery process in itself. So IBM has got 4 entry points or use cases from a data fabric perspective. The first one is a data fabric for governance and privacy. That is the core entry point, which builds your governance layer and then everything around it. Second is data fabric for multi-cloud integration. We also have Data Fabric for Customer 360. So this is all about your entity duplication, de-identification. How do you basically create that Customer 360 paradigm? And the last one is Data Fabric for MLOps and Trustworthy AI. And the angle over here is you want to make sure that your ML investments is based on data that can be trusted. So it's that trust in data layer, which is essentially your governance framework that we invest into in this particular entry point. So let me go over to the next slide. I also wanted to spend some time talking about some client examples where we have invested into. And these are actual client examples that, that my team has worked on. The first one is with a global telecom, a telecommunication company. A global telecommunication company. And let me, yeah. And this example was, was all around CCPA and the ability to create some kind of a data marketplace. So in this particular case, the client had the need to enable offshore users, which was their data science and BI users, to connect to the data that is located in the US. But as the client worked with a lot of different organizations, including your government organizations, there was a lot of sensitive data in their repository. And a lot of this data could not be exposed to external locations. So as they move a lot of this data offshore, they wanted to allow those users to connect to this particular information to build analytical models or to build new ML models. And the process that they had in place was through a Hadoop investment. So they had Oracle repositories across their private and public clouds. And they would allow the offshore users by creating copies of their data in this Hadoop environment. And then they would manually de-identify the data, which was an investment of over 20 FTEs. And the offshore users would then connect to this Hadoop system, build their models, their analytic apps, they would test it, and they would send the code back to the US, and the team in the US would revalidate that code and push it into production. So this whole turnaround time would take approximately 4 to 12 weeks. And by the time that they got the data, sometimes the data was already old. It was not attractive anymore. And so there was a lot of concerns and complaints from the consumer side of the house that started surfacing. Also, the client had to invest into the infrastructure cost, right? The operational cost, because they now had to build out ETLs. They had to manually de-identify all of the data. And this was very time consuming and expensive, right? So the solution what we provided was some of our out-of-box capabilities with data virtualization. And we provided the capability that they didn't have before, because we now allowed them to dynamically utilize data across all of their data stores. And then we cataloged them into our governance framework. We classified all of the information, set up the data protection layer, and enforced those data protection rules to the data virtualization layer. And so from a user perspective, all what they had to do is change their existing applications to connect to these virtualized objects that was more like a logical database entry. So with minimal impact to the applications, we were able to solve the problem that would take them upwards of 12 to 15 weeks. We were able to bring it down to hours, if not minutes. So that's the power of a simple data fabric solution that, that you can leverage, and all the automation that comes into play, it can help you achieve some of your business objectives. The second one, what we looked at was around in enforcing regulatory compliance. So this was at another telecom company. And what I wanted to call out over here is the scale and ease of implementation of data fabric, right? So over here, we were working with an environment that had 3,000 applications, 86,000 databases, 26 million tables, and over 700 million columns. So the scale at which we needed to enforce the regulatory compliancy for CCPA, right? So that is another example where we imported all of the glossary of business terms related to the CCPA. We created a taxonomy in our governance framework and also automated data pipelines for running the discovery and classification tasks. And we also built a metadata integration hub, because that's what the client was using in order to serve all of their end users from a reporting perspective. Again, as part of this, the client benefits over 90% accuracy in terms of classification and regulatory compliancy. And in terms of cost avoidance, they were projecting $100 million, up to $100 million of cost avoidance over the period of the CCPA implementation. So another example, the power of the solution in terms of the automation aspects, in terms of achieving scale, performance, and the ROI and the benefits that clients could realize through this investment. So I wanted to bring us together in terms of your next step and how we could get started. Hopefully, I've given you a good teaser in terms of data fabric, what it is, why is it important, what's IBM's point of view. And in this slide, I just have a few steps that you can take to learn more or take a test drive of our data fabric solutions and the different entry points through our digital runs as well. That's available on IBM.com. So with that, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Pradeep. That was great. We have a couple questions. We'll see what we have time for. I think the one I wanted to make sure got asked is, do you have any advice on how to coordinate governance, especially for data quality when your data sources are so distributed?
When the data sources are distributed, means at the end of the day, it all comes down, irrespective of where your data sources reside, the discovery framework would bring it in, and whether it is structured or unstructured data, we would bring it in and we would go through the same data ops workflow in order to assign your business terms, your policies, your data privacy and protection rules. So I think the scale aspect of the solution is key in terms of how we design those solutions.
Excellent, thank you. I know you talked a little bit about the automatic decision making. Could you give a couple more examples of what types of decisions can be automated in this fabric versus stuff that would be manual?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about, like, the data ops workflow. So think about when you're ingesting your data, you're going through your discovery, and you need to assign your business terms and your policies. In the past, that was a manual operation, right? So what we have introduced within our Cloud Pak for Data and through our governance framework is ML models that does that work for you automatically, right? And that's the example what we had with the last telecom vendor with the 90% accuracy of assignments. That's the power of the solution. And we have these models constantly sitting and checking to see if their assignments, the business terms of the business terms, policies, etc., are they correct? And if it is not, the data steward has the ability to train those models in order to make sure that we are, rectifying those and the future assignments are done correctly. So that is just one example where having those kind of automation framework helps you at scale from a data perspective. Like that example again, 700 million columns. When you have to do those kinds of business term assignments manually, think about the amount of investments that you need to have, and that data is just growing. So that's a small example of what we have from an automation perspective. We also have data discovery. So as new data sources come in, you don't have, as a data engineer, you don't have to go and basically set those auto discovery frameworks. We have models again that goes out, and as long as when new data sources are available, it goes out and does its auto discovery, it does its auto data ingestion, and it goes through the entire data ops workflow. So a lot of these capabilities that are reducing the human intervention those are some of the things that we are kind of looking at. We want to make that entire data ops workflow as automated as possible so that folks can focus more on the outcomes and not spend more time on the workflows.
That's great. And I would say that many columns, I'm not sure that's a small example, but it's definitely a great example. So that's perfect. So we're at the half hour. So I want to thank everyone for listening in. And I apologize if we didn't get to your questions, but we'll do our best to get back to you, or feel free to contact myself or Pradeep if you have anything further, or if you'd like to learn more about the data fabric. So thanks very much, Pradeep.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.